What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are First. Welcome into another edition of the NFL Weekly. Tonight, we are going to break down the NFC South. It will be our final NFC South or NFL division preview before, of course, next week. When we record, we will essentially be on the eve of the 2021 season beginning. We've made it. The long winter is over, if you will. So it is time to break down the NFC South, and who better to do it? Of course, we will be relying on Coach Brandon Lupian. You can find Coach at Portland 76er on Twitter. Coach Lupian, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing quite well. As we were speaking off air, been pretty exciting kind of day last couple of days. So it's been going well, and I think we're all excited that we're another week away from the season. But I'm sure there's some rookies and veterans alike that are looking for jobs. So hey, it's that time of the year. And preparation for the start of the season, and we're a full go. So,
yeah, and that is true. Definitely something to think about. That's actually where we'll start the show here in a couple moments, with one of those veterans looking for a job. But the one thing that I always heard, and I don't remember what Hard Knocks it was, but one of the guys, when he got cut, he essentially said, "This is the best time to get cut." More than likely, someone's going to give you a call here in the next couple weeks because NFL does somewhat stand for not for long. Plenty of injuries, unfortunately, will be unfolding. But also to help break it down tonight is our other co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. Mr. Martinez, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing great. The stars are aligned. The first racing season at Del Mar is going to wind down next Monday. Going to give us 2 days of break, and then we're going to be right into the NFL season. Plenty of time to talk football because we won't have to worry about the Major League Baseball playoffs in San Diego, will we?
Wow.
Not after today's loss.
No, shot across the bow. Actually, that hit the bow, but luckily us San Diegans, we're well equipped for a sporting disaster. We're very calm and collected, at least most of us, when it comes to abandoning ship, if you will. Fantastic. That was a great little pull in. I did the change up earlier today, and it was positive because you know what? Hey, we got a chance to sweep the Diamondbacks, and not going to happen. Anyways, moving on to brighter things, at least for sports fans, not for, as Coach Lupian talked about, the newly unemployed, if you will. As obviously the preseason is not just about the delinquent bettors getting some bets in. It is also about figuring out going from 75 to 53. And in some cases, you're young enough or less experienced, you make a practice squad. But essentially the 53-man rosters were trimmed down in the last few days. The biggest name not to make the team is Cam Newton, where we weren't even sure if Mac Jones was going to start. I think this might be the first quarterback controversy that has ever ended with a quarterback being cut rather than a coach coming out and announcing the starter. But Cam Newton, given his walking papers from New England, Raider Jim Martinez, what do you think of the cut and, the future for Cam?
Very surprising. I don't think he's going to be unemployed for long. I would say before the regular season starts, somebody's going to bring him in, make a phone call to him, and there's got to be the wires got to be hot right now. The phone wires just have to be burning up. People trying to figure out who to move and to make room for a guy like that. His days are not over, that's for sure.
I agree. And look, I'll sneak the Gardner Minshew trade in here. I do wonder the thought process if this would have been something that was even a possibility, Do the Eagles wait a few days? I don't know. I don't know if they want to bring in a guy like Cam to kind of fluster that locker room, but Coach Brandon Lupian, what are your thoughts on Cam Newton out in New England?
Yeah, interesting. All of a sudden cut. But I think this had more to do with everything off the field than it had to do on the field. Because all you heard up until the cut was how well he looks, how well prepared he seems going into this season versus last season. And you heard nothing but lies from Belichick about he's trending in the right direction. And then all of a sudden it's like snip. So it's interesting to say the least, but it is that time of the year. And there, like Raider Jim alluded to, I'm sure there's like a handful of teams that have already dialed his number. And I sent the text out yesterday. Is a reunion with Rivera in the making.
Yeah.
We haven't heard nothing yet, but that's. I mean, the possibilities are out there.
I agree. I think Washington is a spot that probably, I don't know the odds right here. I don't even know if they're out there, but that would be my odds-on favorite. I think Denver might want to give them a call. That's a team that, I don't know how they can use him. I don't know what capacity. I mean, obviously, capacity, but is it the perfect fit? I don't believe so. But, if they really do believe that Drew Lock is not the answer, and Teddy Bridgewater is not the full guy, and they feel like they can make a wild card in that division, that could be a possibility. But you do have to wonder, is the Carson Wentz injury, does that get worse? And Indy there's a ton of possibilities, and it could go one of two ways. We could possibly see, Rivera swoop him up, which I think by far makes the most sense. And as an Eagle fan, I don't want to say scares me to death, but it definitely goes, we're probably at best the third best team in this division now. But we'll see how that goes. And there are plenty of people out there, I'm sure, who will tell you that, Fitzpatrick might be a steadier hand in that locker room than a Cam Newton. But we shall see. It is obvious that teams don't really, look, it is not for long in a lot of senses. As Coach talked about, you hear out of one side of Belichick's mouth that, Cam Newton's looking good. And then that was probably for the sake of trying to trade him. Nobody wanted to trade for him, so he gets the old cut. But moving on to the matter at hand, it is the NFC South, obviously the jurisdiction of Coach Lupian. So for these, we will start with Coach Lupian. We're going to start at the presumptive bottom, and it is the Carolina Panthers. This is year number 2 of the Matt Rule experiment, the Matt Rule coaching ship, if you will. It's going to be interesting. The big question mark, obviously, well, maybe not the biggest, but one of the big question marks will be the health of Christian McCaffrey, will be the arrival of Sam Darnold, the second chance, if you will. But with that, Coach Lupian, what are your thoughts on the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah, Carolina is a very interesting team. We normally hear about a quarterback situation where a quarterback's been going through 2 or 3 different offensive coordinators and head coaches, and there's that struggle. Well, a la Sam Darnold coming in from the Jets, going through a number of different coordinators, going through 1 or 2 different head coaches. And now he's coming into a situation where Coach Rule and Joe Barry, his OC, that's their second year in. Well, they're going through the changes. They went through the changes with Teddy Bridgewater last year, and then the backup quarterback coming in, not knowing who, what, when, how things are going to happen. Well, now they got a kid in Sam Darnold that, hey, he wasn't a high first-round draft pick for nothing. He didn't do what he did at USC as a flash in the pan like Mark Sanchez. And, this is a kid that came in to the Jets with a lot of expectations. And unfortunately for him, it had been that merry-go-round of offensive coordinators and head coaches. Well, now the merry-go-round's the other way. And it's going to be up to a guy like Matt Rule to fix his own ship. You know, I alluded to it last week in what he did with Teddy Bridgewater. And, you know, I quoted the tuna, and the tuna wasn't wrong in regards to the game plan and the scheming Matt Rule had for a steady winning veteran quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater. You know, he put the onus on Matt Rule, saying that he managed and coached that team, and Teddy Bridgewater bad. So, you know, second year guy, you know, hopefully a year under the belt, a lot of improvement moving forward with his decision making and his coaching style and tactically. And then do have a healthy Christian McCaffrey, where we've all seen the last couple of years, he just hasn't been there 100%. And, you know, it doesn't make the fantasy owners any happier, but, you know, a lot's been put on this kid's shoulders since, you know, day one, and he was the only talented athlete on that squad, you know, and they could never find anything to mesh with him. Well, now they have a good handful of wide receivers, and we'll see if they could make right, you know, with their guy Sam Darnold. And I was one that I wanted to give Sam Darnold a look in New Orleans, and it just didn't go that way. And good luck to him, but just not when he plays my Saints. And you know, it's a kind of we will see kind of thing, you know, since Coach Rule's come in and Rivera been out, and we don't know how far they really are in this transition period going from Coach Rivera to Rule. So we'll see. But, you know, last year they were a team that easily could have been hovering around 500. They were in a lot of games, and some even picked them to finish second ahead of Tampa in the division. And you know, they showed flashes. They just couldn't finish at the end. And a lot of that came down to the inexperience at head coach versus the talent and inexperience of the players. So, you know, it'll be interesting moving into second year with this coaching staff.
Yeah, and I do believe, you know, that bringing in Sam Darnold, there are obviously going to be people who question it, but I think that's a better route than you know, taking a top, you know, wasting a first round pick on not so much the best player, but the best quarterback or whatever is available. Obviously, you have the first round pick, then yeah, shoot your shot. But when you're drafting in the 10s, 11, 12s, a lot of time that's the third or fourth quarterback overall. So, you know, have faith in your guys. Joe Brady, incredibly talented at the offensive coordinator position. So we'll see how that goes. Plenty of weapons around Sam Darnold as well. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the 2021 Carolina Panthers, who are currently 10-1 to win the NFC South?
Yeah, NFC South is a 2-horse race. None of the horses are named Carolina Panthers. What can I say? I mean, they're going to be good. They're going to be competitive. The problem is what we saw last year. Christian McCaffrey is definitely going to be a force as he has been when he's healthy. That's the key word there. The operative clause is when he's healthy, because anytime he was out, you could count on them to just have a poor performance. And how good is the offensive line this year? They did improve things by bringing in Sam Darnold, if you ask me. I think that's a good move, a smart move. But again, it's his first year with a second-year coach with a maybe healthy Christian McCaffrey. How good is the defense? They weren't that solid last year. They had apparently one of the stats I read is 19 3-and-outs last year, and that was it, which is, you know, basically won a game. Other than that, they were giving up first downs, letting the other offenses stay on the field. So they have to improve on that side of the ball. Now, offensive line is going to have to play strong, which that's been my song about every team that I talk about every week. But it's so health and Christian McCaffrey, and how well does the new quarterback meld with the second-year coach and his game plan?
Yeah, it's, I think, a lot going to land on those two guys, Sam Darnold and Christian McCaffrey. You can make a case that this is the most weapons that Sam Darnold has ever had. You can make a case for it. I mean, look, I'm a huge Robbie Anderson fan. I think DJ Moore is a good wide receiver as well. And obviously, Christian McCaffrey may be the best overall running back in the game. The question mark I have here is, you go into the draft and your best player is Christian McCaffrey. And in this sense, he is by far your most important player. So what do you do to help him out? Well, instead they dropped Chuba Hubbard, who I really like. I don't like just his name. I think he's going to be a good player in this league out of Oklahoma State. Not quite the help. I hate to say it. I don't want to say it's an admission of, oh, Christian's going to get hurt at some point. But it's like I said, it seems like, is that the route you're going? That's interesting. But for Christian McCaffrey, him staying healthy, Sam Darnold being able to hand the ball off or be able to dump the ball off maybe 55, 60% of the time, have the defense think run first, or at least Christian McCaffrey first. Maybe that helps Sam Darnold. On the defensive side, I like what they did on the defensive, at least in the draft. I'm a big JC Horn fan. I think he can be a big time player in this league. Jeremy Chin's young on that defensive side in that free safety spot. I think he can make some leaps forward. But overall, this is going to be a tough division to stay competitive in. I think especially when you look at the top. I think them and Atlanta are going to have their fun, especially going up and down the field on each other more than likely. But at the end of the day, as Raider Jim alluded to, the Carolina Panthers are not going to be a factor unless it's them spoiling a party for one of those other teams I talked about late in the year. But moving on to the team that most people expect to finish third in the division. Currently, they are 7.5 to 1 or plus 750. It is the Atlanta Falcons. They are obviously coming in. The Dan Quinn era ended mid-season last year. And now it is time for Arthur Smith, I believe, is the new coach in Atlanta. Coach Lupian, what are your thoughts on your probably least favorite team in the whole of the NFL, the Atlanta Falcons?
When it comes to the on-field rivalry between the Falcons and the Saints, yeah, probably the least favorite team. But, I mean, I'm going to give them a major shout-out right now because their ownership group didn't have to, but did donate $1 million to Hurricane Ida relief. So, I mean, thank you and kudos to them. I mean, I know there's another donation from another team elsewhere, and but I mean to get it from them, at least they know that there's lives at stake and livelihoods, and they didn't have to do it, but they did it, right? You just kind of give them their props on that. But when it comes to what they put out on the field, I don't think anyone knew if prior to the draft if this was going to be another Matt Ryan season. And then unbeknownst, Matt Ryan's here where they're talking about, a Mac Jones, drafting a Mac Jones in the draft, and Matt Ryan stays, and then all of a sudden, even I said, Julio's going to stay. Well, Julio's out, and he's out in Tennessee now. So, there's been some changes to some major names on this team where, if it wasn't the quarterback, it was going to be Kyle Pitts, and that's who they went with. And then you see Kyle Pitts, and then you see Julio Jones, and then you're like, wow, what a weapon, they're adding to Matt Ryan and whatnot. And this offense is going to be dynamic. And well, you subtract Jones and you add Pitts, and you don't know where they're really going to be. Are they going to try to outgun people and outgun and outscore teams? And now it's just kind of like, well, they're going to put their numbers up, but maybe not as many as they would have with a Julio. They didn't really do much on the defensive end, and that's where they had trouble. I think they've been relying on bringing free agents in the offseason the last couple of years on the defensive side, and it just hasn't worked out. And you got an aging quarterback in Matt Ryan that I think he still has a number of years ahead of him in the NFL. But if you're not going to protect him, if you're going to subtract and add weapons, you're really not doing yourself, very good. And it just kind of says, sure if you're in a rebuilding project. You're really not sure if you're going to try to win. You're just kind of there in limbo. So, for them to be ahead of Carolina, I think is generous. I actually think Carolina is going to be better than Atlanta. And, we will see. But, thanks for the donation. Good luck for the rest of the season. And, you don't really ever hear about, other than the draft, major moves coming out of Atlanta.
Yeah, just looking over the roster, I think this is a really good football team for Arena League. They're going to score a lot of points, but it's going to be a matter of which team gets a stop first. And more than likely, it's probably not going to be the Atlanta Falcons defense. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the 2021 Atlanta Falcons?
Yeah, I said before, it's a 2-horse race in the NFC South. If the Panthers are not one of the horses, and neither are the Falcons. And quite honestly, when you've led off and said, we're going to start with the team that will probably be the bottom of the barrel, I went right to my Atlanta notes because I think that's where they're going to end up. They were 4-12 last year, and that was with Julio Jones. I mean, this is a challenge for the quarterback. And when you only have, even when we spoke about Carolina, when you are relying on two names, when you're just, you lead off, you talk about the two names, and as long as Sam Darnold and McCaffrey can stay healthy and get in sync, they might be okay. You got to have more than that. You got to be able to start naming some of the offensive linemen, some of the running backs. This is a first-year coach. This is a first-year defensive coordinator. They brought in a couple of good free agents. They've got Grady Jarrett. They brought in Daron Harmon. Not bad guys, but I mean, Harmon's third in 3 years, I think it is. But and that makes it a better defense, is what they're saying. Well, we did better because we brought him in. And again, Kyle Pitts, the word is he's going to be really good. Well, going to be isn't what Matt Ryan needs when he lost to Julio Jones. So I think it's going to be a long season for the Atlanta Falcon fan base.
Yeah, it's a tough spot, because especially for this team that, look, as I alluded to before I pass it over to Raider Jim, this defense is not very good, and I'm being as nice as possible. I mean, with all due respect to Grady Jarrett and Daron Harmon, if those are your guys that you're leaning on,
right?
Yikes. I mean, once again, no disrespect to those gentlemen, because they probably, forget more about football than I'll ever know. But at the end of the day, when the whistle is blown, they are going to probably be on the bottom end of what you're looking at talent-wise. So you're going to have to score points. And for a team that got rid of, arguably their, at least this generation's most talented wideout at that position, or at that, with that team, I should say. I mean, Julio Jones was an icon in Atlanta. They're going to retire his number. He's everything. Put any superlative you want in front of him, and now he's gone. And a lot of eyes now, Calvin Ridley, who I think is a really, really good wide receiver, picked him in my fantasy draft on just the basis of going that it's his show now. It is no longer, okay, do you kind of let Julio beat you underneath and then maybe over the top? Or are you going to go after Calvin Ridley? Well, guess what? It's just Calvin Ridley now. Obviously, Kyle Pitts, I'm very high on him, but as Raider Jim talked about, going to be good. I mean, look, on NFL.com, he's not even listed as the starting tight end. He's third out of 3 tight ends on the list. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, it's not set in stone. It doesn't mean anything, going forward, but it also doesn't mean that this guy has done enough to where it's a coach has come out and gone, no, he needs to be put on your list, or, the NFL writers or whatever have said, no, we've heard enough that we think he's going to be a starter. There have been a lot of talk about whether or not he is even a tight end, because look, I know you don't have to be a great blocker anymore, but you still got to block. And that's definitely not his strength, which is, I guess, fine. I will say Cordell Patterson, he's always been one of my favorite players, because he can beat you in so many different ways, whether it's in the return game, whether he can get, line up in pretty much any spot on the offense outside of offensive line. At the very least, I think Matt Ryan, maybe not the arm strength, Still, football IQ is there. He can put Cordell Patterson in certain spots, but that's not going to make a difference. It's not going to turn the Atlanta Falcons from, oh, this team is, really, good offensively into fantastic. It's not even the case in most of that sense. So for the Falcons, I agree with both of you. I think Carolina here, and I only did it based on Bovada. So there you go. I mean, that's your chance right there. Obviously, I'm not making a case for Carolina to win the division, but if you want to go make that pick and pick Carolina ahead of Atlanta, you'll make some money. Feel free to go do that if you want to dive into the bets there. But I agree with you. I think Carolina has a better outlook. I think they're more balanced, but the asterisk is there when you're talking about Carolina pending Christian McCaffrey's health. Because look, if Christian McCaffrey goes down, I'm not putting any money on Carolina at any point at that. So it is time to move on to, we'll switch it up just kind of a little bit, what we've done for these divisions when we, each one of us kind of, it is a specialty. We leave our team to the end. So we will go up to what people, or at least Bovada, believe will be the division winner. It is the defending Super Bowl champions. It is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Coach Lupian, what are your thoughts on Tampa Bay?
Hey, two words, Tom Brady, right? I mean, geez, they're nothing without him, and then they bring him in and they're everything with him. But, this is another team that they really didn't do much in the offseason, like big splash-wise, but what they did was they reserved and brought back a lot of those veterans that were that major core, sinking in all together to make that run and win the Super Bowl. So yeah, it's likely that they're supposed to win the division on paper, but there's the Super Bowl champs. They're not the division champs until they win the actual division. But it'll be interesting to see, because this is a full year and a full offseason with Brady and Arians, and we kind of saw the highs and lows last season until they really went on that major high and survived and squeaked by Washington and made that Super Bowl run. So, they've shored up a lot. It became obvious once they brought in Tom Brady that we have to shore up this offensive line, because they didn't do it for the previous quarterback. They brought in a lot of veterans that know how to play the game and play the game the right way, and relied on their superstar, Mr. Wonderful, GOAT, all-universe quarterback Tom Brady to take them to the promised land. And he even completed a pass, passing the trophy from boat to boat in the harbor. Goodness, can this guy miss? And then he's just hungry for more. And unless you have that inner drive like he does, he puts himself on a pedestal of greatness, and this is the outcome: Super Bowl, Lombardi trophies, and all that goodness. So, a team to definitely have that target on, and not just for the NFL, but for the NFC South.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation in Tampa, as you kind of alluded to, a full off season, and every single player, I believe, or at least every starter, is coming back. So that continuity is there. Obviously, when you're the Super Bowl champ and you can bring everybody back, that's great. I will say one thing: this team was old last year, and my math tells me everyone is 1 year older now. So that could be an issue. Now, we're talking about Tom Brady, who, probably performs and practices and eats better than, pretty much 98% of the, either athletes or people on this planet. But Tampa Bay, obviously coming back, they're the presumptive favorites. They are minus 200 to win this division. You're gonna have to put some money down to make some scratch on this, which is kind of odd for a futures bet. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I don't think they're going to be a repeat of the Super Bowl champions. I don't think that they're going to win the NFC South. I think the Saints will win the NFC South. You used the magic word, age. Yeah, Brady's great. I imagine Brady just, spends a lot of the offseason wearing a loincloth and sitting on a mountain somewhere and drink, eating fruits and dates and nuts and things like that. And so it's not him, but Gronkowski, you see the reviews of the team, and it's Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. Gronkowski, I'll bet, is hurt before week 5. Something just always goes wrong. But what's going to save them? What's going to save them is that defense. They've got the killer defense, and they are all coming back. Shaq Barrett's going to be back. Jason Pierre-Paul's going to be back. They've got Devin White back. They brought in this kid, Joe Tryon. These guys are loaded, and that's what makes them dangerous. They gave up 80 yards rushing per game last year. That is something. Well, guess what? The Saints aren't a run-happy team. The Saints are going to be able to go downfield against these guys. And I think that's going to be the difference when it comes head-to-head play. And I've got my reason on why the Saints didn't progress, where they should have last year when we get to that team. But I think the Buccaneers are going to be strong. It's going to go down to the wire. In the vernacular of horse racing, this is going to be a match race down to the wire. This division could very well be decided between New Year's and the 20th of January.
Yeah, and I got a bet for you gentlemen, because it sounds like, you're both on board with New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Atlanta, exact finish. Bovada will pay 8-1 on that. So
really?
Yeah, 8-1. I was actually just kind of looking at that. You got to kind of dive a little deep. It's under the NFL futures, but they do allow you. I mean, there are a lot of bets to dive into that rabbit hole. So 8-1 for that. But my thoughts on Tampa Bay, they're the 2 Ds. And obviously Raider Jim talked about the first, and it's the defense. This defense, wow. Obviously the age is definitely a question mark, but this is a defense that, you talk about Tom Brady all you want, but a big reason why this team was lifting the Lombardi Trophy last year is because of that defense. I probably said this 5 or 6 times this past offseason. A lot of people forget it. Tom Brady threw 3 second-half interceptions in that NFC Championship game. All right. Any other quarterback does that, we're still thinking about that. And that's fine. It is what it is. Interceptions aren't the end of the world. But the fact of the matter is that defense bailed him out pretty much every time. So that's what they're going to be relying on. Now, the other D I want to talk about is depth. And while you talked about the age and that stuff, this team is so deep. I mean, just look at the running back position. They go Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, and Giovanni Bernard. Okay, there are plenty of teams that would probably trade a 3rd or 4th round pick for Giovanni Bernard. So that's right there. You got Antonio Brown essentially playing 4th fiddle behind Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Scotty Miller. Even Cameron Brate is going to be a 2nd string tight end. I mean, obviously the Buccaneers, in their dream scenario, these players don't have big roles. But if it gets to that point, because I agree with you, Raider Jim, I mean, Rob Gronkowski is the NFL's version of Shaq. Shaq used to play, he would come back, he would come play in March. That's when he would make his season debut, which was fine. They'd make the playoff and that stuff. But that's kind of what Gronkowski is. And I think in Gronkowski's mind, and a big reason why, New England wasn't a huge fan, is in his mind, the offseason is for Rob Gronkowski. It's not for 2020 or, next year's football season. Gronkowski, I don't know if you know, but he likes to party. I mean, it's being a bit sarcastic. I'm sure everyone knows that. I have a old coworker who went to U of A at the same time of Rob Gronkowski and has a picture with them playing beer pong together. And well, let's just say Rob Gronkowski would not have passed the breathalyzer that night. So those moments and those things are kind of in a way why Gronkowski is so great. It's probably frustrating. There are plenty of athletes out there that just go, man, if you just keep your head on straight, you'd be maybe the greatest tight end ever. But that's not the way Gronkowski wants to go. He will be out. He'll miss 8 or 10 games. Absolutely no doubt about it. But as I said, the depth of this team and the Tom Brady effect, he'll get players to come here for less because he knows, or they know, they're going to immediately have a shot at the Super Bowl. And for every other team in the NFC South, this is the target. And at the very least, you know what you got to do. You got to get in his face and you have to score. If you can get to 24 points, you're probably going to beat this team. I really do think that this isn't a high-powered offense. This isn't a team that's just going to go up and down the field, and quickly at least. They may go up and down the field, but not quickly. So if you can cut this down to a 6, 7, 8 possession game each and get your defense to make a couple plays, I really do believe this is a beatable team. And the next team we're going to be talking about, I think at least 2 of our hosts believe will be the division champs. I know for a fact Coach does, because he's got a bet in on him, futures bet at.
I thought we were done.
Yeah, Raider Jim was ready to go, but no, just kidding. Nope, it is of course Coach Lupian's beloved Saints, and it is time to hear what his thoughts are on what could possibly be the biggest question mark in all of football, is who picks up the reins at the quarterback position after Drew has retired. But Coach Lupian, the floor is yours.
I could hear Raider Jim's delayed dial turning. That's the question of the offseason. Breeze is retired, and who's the next guy up? And respectfully so, Sean Payton gave Taysom Hill an opportunity to challenge for the job. But in my heart and in my mind, I always thought it was going to come down to the former Buccaneer and Jameis Winston and being named the starter for one reason and one reason only, because when you put Taysom Hill behind center, the dynamicy of the entire offense, even with the Kamara, even with the Michael Thomas, just differs. You put him on the edge, you line him up at a slot, you put him behind in the backfield, all of a sudden defensive have to, respond in multiple ways to defend that offense, and the dynamicy of it just, exacerbates. So I think it was inevitable, but respectfully so. He did sign that extension a year ago. I think with the guarantee, he'll at least get a shot at the starting job. So with that said, the quarterback controversy is over. The quarterback's challenge is over. Jameis has been named the starter after the week 2 preseason game. He put up some good numbers against a bad Jacksonville Jaguars preseason team, but I don't think it was so much the numbers that was the deciding factor. It was the composure in the huddle. It was how he handled the offense, the checkdowns, the reads, and I think ultimately the arm strength, because I think the arm strength in the deep ball has been what's been missing with this team for the last 3 years. Breeze hasn't been able to get the ball down the field, and when the ball does get down the field, it's been a Teddy Bridgewater. On occasion, it was a Taysom Hill, and during the playoffs, it was Jameis Winston with that trick play and that ball going down the field for that touchdown. So, ultimately, with Winston under center, it opens up the offense deeper. Ultimately, with Taysom Hill lined up wherever he is, opens up the offense width-wise and up and down. So, this is an offense that's going to score. Even with Michael Thomas out because he decided to have surgery late, these guys have proven with or without Mike Thomas, they're able to put up points. And we'll see the emergence of some young wide receivers. We're going to see, Alvin Kamara and how he responds in a second year after signing that big extension last year. And then as Raider Jim always alludes to, offensive line. Like, talk about one of the best, maybe top 3 offensive lines in the league. And their center is another year more experience going into his 3rd year. Their guard, Cesar Ruiz, and they might flip-flop. We'll see. He's a 2nd year going into this season. And that's all they're ever talking about is the growth and maturity of Cesar Ruiz. Well, he was the immature one last year. He was the one getting beat. He was the one that was the question mark. Well, the way they're talking about it now, that's not the case. And he just bolsters an already strong unit. And then on the defensive side, you know, they are going through some coaching changes. They lost Aaron Glenn, who was the secondary coach and is now the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. What's the secondary going to look like? Well, where the secondary always started out slow in a season, how well and adapt and ready they are to go at the beginning of the season. This is a unit in the secondary that still has question marks. Nobody knows what the legal ramifications of a Marshawn Latimer are going to be. And then who's going to line up opposite of a Marshawn Latimer? You know, Ken Crawley looked good in the preseason, but, you know, again, that's just a preseason. They didn't really address a cornerback early in the draft versus addressing one midway through the draft. And that's a guy that stayed out a year because of COVID. So, you know, the talent may be there, but, you know, the rust and all that is still going to be there as well for him. So there's going to be some question marks on the defensive end, defensive side. But where there won't be question marks is that defensive front. This is a team that I've said every year, whether it's their offensive line or whether it's their defensive line, they're built inside out and their strengths are attributed to it. Their record is attributed to it. Their defensive line coach coming from North Carolina State 4 years ago has been dynamic with this group, whether it's how they're rotating or whether they're finding like diamonds in the rough as undrafted free agents and shoring up that run game. This is a team that doesn't give up a lot of running yards, just like the team we talked about before, Tampa Bay. Well, Tampa Bay and New Orleans, their run defense has always been top in the league, and the pressure that they put on the edges, it's there, but it's finalizing plays and getting that ultimate sack at the end of the day. That losing a guy like Hendrickson this offseason to Cincinnati is gonna leave some question marks. Will they get some things done? Absolutely, but are there holes to fill? Yeah, and there's questions to be answered. We don't know how well Quan Alexander is going to come back from an Achilles injury. You know, this is a kid that, you know, coming from San Francisco, he was a top linebacker in the league before injuries kind of rattled his career. And then, you know, when we bring him over last year, he's having major impacts, and then all of a sudden the Achilles goes. You know, so, you know, how's his recovery going to be? And then, you know, they're going to count on a lot of young kids to provide backup depth, and who knows how ready it is moving into the season. So there's still some question marks. The coaching staff, Sean Payton, they know what the heck they're doing. I think they feel a lot of opportunities to open up. The offense are there with the Jameis Winston. Kamara is the best running back in the division. I know you think Christian McCaffrey is, but, you know, when it comes down to the numbers, very comparable. But when you come down to health, let's just call it like it is. It's been Kamara. It was Kamara last year, and it was Kamara's rookie year, and, you know, the numbers are comparable. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see. But, you know, this is the defending division champs the last number of years. They swept through the NFC South undefeated last year. That's never been done. And they're still the division champs going into this season. So, you know, there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot to look forward to. And, you know, there are some distractions. We talked off air about, you know, Hurricane Ida and how the Saints aren't going to play a home game or be in New Orleans for over a month. And that's going to have an impact, and that's going to be some adversity. And good teams face adversity, you know, head on, and it'll be a challenge. And this team will be, we'll know what kind of team this is going to be, you know, once they get back home and dealt with some kind of adversity. But, you know, I think this is a staff that's dealt with the same kind of similar adversity with Hurricanes, and they know what to expect, and they know how to lead, and they know how to guide, and they know how to prepare. So it'll be a good test early and interesting challenge moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be a very nice, fight at the top of that division. As we've kind of alluded to through this, it's going to come down to Tampa and New Orleans, and will these 4 games or these 2 games, I don't know how many they have to play in Jacksonville as opposed to New Orleans, but I just hope that, if for whatever reason the Saints don't win the division, it will be because of what they did on the field, not because of what happens early. I mean, no one really has control over the weather. Obviously you could look back on certain things, that's fine. But, the hurricane, Mother Nature is going to do what Mother Nature wants to do, whether it's football season or not. Like I said, I hope that this division is, settled on the field late rather than, it was really tough when the Saints, they struggled. They were 1-3, 1-4, and had to kind of play catch up and made the playoffs, but didn't win the division. We'll see if that does end up becoming a factor. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, you know what? I think they are certainly the front runner. I stand by that. And I think what's going to keep them at the top, it is the head coach. This is a guy that knows the game. He knows personnel. He knows how to get the most out of his players, which I always say, that's what you got to do as a head coach. It's not happening in Oakland or Las Vegas, is it? But it is going to happen this year again in New Orleans. They've got I think the defensive backfield is going to be fantastic. I really do. I mean, they got a franchise tag player. It's a safety. This guy's playing at, $10.6 million. He's just great. As Marcus Williams, they've got, and we know Lattimore's got his issues, but then they also have Malcolm Jenkins. They've got Cam Jordan at the end. They're stout. And then Coach said it. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the game. Put anybody back there, Winston Hill, they're protected. They're going to be just fine. So it's just going to be about execution. One of the things that bit them last year was 19 pass interference calls. And so, coming from supporting a team that is one of the best at getting flags thrown on them, sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes it may not be as legitimate, but, they get that under control. There's no reason they can't duplicate the 12 and 13-4 record, I guess, this year. My concern is the first 3 weeks of the season. They're going to go to Jacksonville. They play the Packers. After that, they're going to go to Carolina, play their first conference game. After that, they're going to be on the road and they're going to go up to New England. That's a tough stretch. That's a tough 3 games. The other thing to keep in mind, because the game 3 is on the 26th, I believe. Yeah, it's going to still be hurricane season. It's going to still be inclement weather on the East Coast. So even, they're not going to play in New Orleans. They're going to play in Jacksonville. Well, there's already another hurricane lining up over there. And there's probably one right beyond that, because they're saying this is going to be one of the worst years in a while for back to back to back. So these guys are really going to have to be on their toes. And that might be their toughest opponent, is the weather and the travel and not being able to play at home. It's a different group of guys than, 16 years ago when Katrina hit, or however many, 13, 16 years ago, whatever it was. So how do they overcome the adversity of that? Personnel-wise, coaching-wise, they're in good shape. So now it's just, how do they deal with the elements and the mental part of the game?
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it. I mean, there are very few rivalries in football that are more heated than Saints fans and pass interference calls. But that was a little bit of a low blow. I apologize, Coach, but I had to throw it in there. But
you can count on us.
Yeah, I had to. You brought it up, and hey, there's my one-liner of the show. But in all seriousness, for the New Orleans Saints, obviously moving on from Drew Brees, or the day after, the season after, if you will, ironically, does look to be at least somewhat affected by a hurricane, which of course that was Drew Brees' first excursion to New Orleans was, the post Katrina situation. So a little bit of irony there. I will say for the Saints, the Michael Thomas saga situation, whatever you want to call it, as crazy as this sounds, I do now, obviously, look, in a perfect world, he's healthy 17 games and he's there every single week. However, I do think maybe the delayed surgery to the point where maybe he comes back late. It may be in a baseball. I'm thinking of in a baseball mindset of, look, the Saints know at some point they're going to get the most dynamic player on the trade block, if you will. Michael Thomas, when he comes back, will make this offense better. Is this offense anemic without him? No. Is it worse off? Yes. But they're still going to put points up. You got Traquan Smith, who's just, a speedster. You obviously have Jameis Winston, and what Coach brought up about Taysom Hill and the dynamicy of the offense. I think the same thing goes for the dynamicy of Taysom Hill. I think when you see Taysom Hill 65 times a game, he's a lot easier to manage. He's a lot easier to kind of diagnose. When you throw him in back there 5-10 times a game, immediately when he gets in there, the defense's ears perk up. What's going on? Blah, blah. You just have them off balance. When Taysom Hill is in there every single snap, the defense can settle in. Okay, Taysom's going to do this. Taysom's going to do that. And one of my big question marks coming into this show, or, when I started to dive into the Saints, is who is their backup? And I'm not talking about Taysom Hill being the backup. I'm talking about Trevor Siemian being the backup. And you might laugh. You might go, ha, ha, ha. Oh, he did get cut. I apologize. Okay, so is it Ian Book? Is it Ian Book who made the team?
So the depth chart looks like this: Winston, Hill, Book.
Got it. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So that maybe changes a little bit of my thought process because, with Trevor Siemian, obviously, look, he's not that guy. He's not a franchise quarterback. I understand that. But he's a guy who's been there. He's done that. He's not going to be a guy like last year with Taylor Heineke, who was taking finals or whatever, blah, blah, blah. If he needs to get put into that spot, he's at least been there. Ian Book, not so much the case. But the point I was going to make was, if you do have a backup, that backup has to be the true backup, because every time that Taysom Hill steps on the field, when he's not in the quarterback, and when he is in a quarterback spot, but when he's not in that quarterback spot, you're putting him in danger of, an injury. And, an absolute nightmare is a game in the same game where Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston both go down. That is an absolute nightmare, especially if it is Taysom Hill in a non-quarterback situation. But I agree with you, Coach. It's Jameis is the guy. He has to be the guy for the sake of this franchise. And really, really excited to see these Saints and Falcons go kind of toe-to-toe, not just in the 2 60-minute games they have, but really throughout the season, and how they handle Christian McCaffrey and, what they deal with not a very good Atlanta defense, but an Atlanta team that's probably going to put up 21, 24 points that who knows. If you make a mistake early, you could be down 17-3 and go, uh-oh, we can't lose this game. What happens now? How these teams kind of deal with that. But I'm going to kind of end my thought with what Raider Jim, I believe, started with. And it's Sean Payton. Probably the best coach in the game. Definitely the best offensive mind, the most creative offensive innovator that we have right now. What Belichick does on the defensive side, Sean Payton does probably even more on the offensive side. And I think that will be the difference. I am not going to be as bold as you two gentlemen with saying the Saints are going to win this division. I still think Tampa Bay, the only thing that, pulls me away from Tampa Bay is what they did last year against good football teams up until the playoffs. They were not good against good football teams. They were the bully. I called them the school bully, who they beat up on the little kids who can't defend themselves. And then the minute someone else steps up that knew a little bit of karate, they got their butts kicked and went home crying to mom. Obviously that changed in the playoffs, but we will see. It's definitely going to be a fight between these two. And it's going to be fantastic. And what else is fantastic is that's it. Not that the show is over. I mean, you don't want to see the end, but that's officially the off season, folks, at least for this podcast, because when we talk to you next, we will be talking about regular season football. We will be talking about over-unders. We will be talking about lines.
And for real money next week.
Yeah, for real money, not for the ones where you got to call 1-800-GAMBLER if you are betting. Because once again, I will die on that hill. If you bet on preseason football, you have a problem. But anyways, no judgment here, just letting you know that is the case. But next week, of course, we will be diving in a little bit of a change. Obviously, the last year when we did it, we picked every single game. We're going to talk about every single game, Some of us will have very strong opinions one way or another, but we're not going on a cross. We're not going to put on, a consensus on, who went here, but we're not going to do that. We're going to bet probably 5 or 6 games or 5 or 6 ways, and that's about all she wrote, but we will talk about all of them. And we will have our final thoughts now. And we'll start with the star of the show, Coach Brandon Lupian, your final thoughts on not just the NFC South, but really getting through the full NFL offseason, as we are now essentially a week away from the NFL season beginning.
Far from the star, I got to rely on my co-host to, bring this whole thing together and make it what we do, So kudos will always go around. But, I'm just excited for this upcoming season. These teams, I'm sure, are excited for this upcoming season because, they didn't have protocol. Well, there's protocols, but not as bad. And everyone's having a full off season. And they're getting real true looks at holes in each one of their teams to address and strengths and weaknesses to like and dislike. So it's going to be like I said last week, it's going to be a fun NFL season this year for all teams around. It's going to feel a whole lot more normal than not moving forward. And, we're still dealing with the pandemic. So, there's a lot to kind of like digest and prepare for. And there's protocols to follow. So, with all that said, again, we're a week closer to the start of the season. Fantasy teams have been drafted. 53-man rosters have been made, and teams are finalizing schemes and game planning for week 1. And I'm excited, and we're all excited, and just looking forward to a good NFL 2021-22 season.
Amen. Raider Jim, your final thoughts as we officially wrap up the offseason.
Well, I always hated the end of summer and when school started, and the only thing I took solace in is I knew that meant that on Sundays there would be football, on Mondays there would be football. So I'm really looking forward to the season getting underway. And yes, as you alluded to, it will be a different format, and I'm looking forward to that too. We're going to bring quality like we do week in and week out. There's a reason the 3 of us know one another. We were picked by the local sports radio station 4 years ago now, 3 years ago, whatever it was, and because they felt we were qualified to go on the air and talk, and we've continued to do this. I'm just proud to be part of it. We do call ourselves first off the bench, but I'll tell you what, we can start in anybody's lineup. I will tell you that. And we may not tell you what to bet on each and every game this season, but when we do, trust me, you can take it to the bank. And always remember, every single bet counts.
Amen. And we will stand by those bets as well. No funny business later on, no Google Doc 2 a.m. editing. Anyways, if you know, you know. But anyways, it is the end of the off season. And as Raider Jim kind of talked about, it's a new season, and not just fall. It's not just, getting towards the end of summer and, the pumpkin spice lattes for all you PSL lovers and all that stuff. But it is football season. It is time to kind of put to rest all the questions we have. I think the NFL offseason, the NFL season, there are never more questions in any other sport heading in. And a lot of it's because of the turnover and the way the league is kind of set up. Well, on, Thursday and what will be the full weekend of Sunday of the 12th of September, we're going to get a lot of those, or at least be on our way to a lot of the answers of those questions. And for one fan base, they're going to be on the way to a very magical run. There's going to be at least 2 or 3 surprises at the very least. We always talk about in the offseason who's going to be that worst to first team and vice versa. 2 of those, 3 of those are going to happen, and we're going to be here to break it all down. Every single Wednesday, these pods will probably be dropping Thursday before the game does go, as of course, Thursday night football. Raider Jim, you talked about football is going to be on Sunday and Mondays. Well, now you get very mediocre football also on Thursday if you would like to.
Go.
Yeah, it's the ultimate hypocrisy. Keep the players safe, but we're going to put 1 extra game in, and everyone's going to have to play on Thursdays. But yes, please check out these new helmets. Anyways, with that, it is time to end the show, and thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the NFL Weekly, presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. Have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you very, very soon, and take care.
Peace out.